Welcome, everyone. It's so great to have you here in one more webinar. And today's webinar is a very special one because we have our ACFL Teacher of the Year 2021 ACFL National World Language Teacher of the Year, Elena Kamenetzky, and she will be sharing with us all her expertise and having the opportunity for all the Indiana World Language teachers and all other colleagues in other places. But first of all, before giving the floor to Elena, I would like to introduce the team. So I would like to introduce Teresa Nichols, who is the director of the Indiana Language Roadmap. With Teresa, we have been working since 2017 in different programs, and I'm glad that she accepted to support the webinars this summer again. But also in the team, we have Shanmei Wan, who is the first vice president for our World Language Organization, FOTA, the Indiana Foreign Language Teachers Association. And she has good news, excellent news regarding our conference in November because we have a magnificent presenter. Shanmei, please.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming. Good news, we are going to have the fall conference for IVTA, and we have the keynote speaker, Martina Best. So welcome to join us. The day will be from November the 4th to November the 6th. Okay, we have hybrid mode. So welcome. Looking forward to see you guys. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Shanmei, so we have also the call for papers for all of our presenters. So please remind us the deadline.
Okay, the deadline will be on August the 1st for the proposal submission.
So we invite all the world language colleagues here in Indiana to send your proposal, and obviously from other places, and also from the executive board, we have Jason. She's our treasurer, and she has also helped us in this webinar series last summer and in this summer, and she's going to help us with the chat questions that you will have. And also it's an honor to have our president, the FOTA president, Amanda Ramirez, who is also a Japanese teacher here in our state. She has been a president of the Japanese Teachers Association in our state, and she's serving currently as the FOTA president. So Amanda, a few words or, oh, okay.
I have to give her, okay, there you go.
I'm here. Hi, I'm Amanda Ramirez. I'm the president of IPLTA, and I've also been president of AITJ. The link is in the chat. Teresa posted for us for information on the fall conference. There's also information there if you would like to download our app for more information. There's also a way that you can maybe get your registration for free if you are techie. So check it out. I'm very excited to have Elena here with us today and to hear what she has to say about supporting our students.
Great, thank you, Amanda. And Teresa, it's going to be our person in explaining some things about the logistics. Teresa, please.
Thank you. We're so excited to see so many of you here today for this webinar, some familiar names from even last summer, as well as some new faces. A little bit of Zoom etiquette. We are going to keep everyone muted during the chat today, just because we have over 80 folks. We've got 90 individuals with us today. So to keep things easy, we encourage you to use the chat. We will be constantly monitoring that chat for questions. For everybody who joins us for a majority of today's presentation, we will send you a certificate of attendance. You all signed in using your email account, so we have your contact information, and you'll get that in a couple of weeks. For those who are hard of hearing, there is a way to turn on closed captions today. I'm going to put a link in the chat that explains it in more detail, but if you look at your bottom toolbar, there is a button with a CC on it. If you click that button, you can turn on a transcription that will show an auto typed version of the words that are being spoken out loud. So you can use that as another option. And last but not least, this is the third of 7 webinars that we're offering for free in this series. So we encourage you to register for others, and I'll put a link for that in the chat. And we thank our financial sponsor, the Hamilton Lugar School of Global and International Studies, the Center for the Study of Global Change, which is a federally designated national resource center. So we thank them for their financial support of the series.
And along with the Hamilton Lugar, also this event is a co-sponsor with the Indiana Language Roadmap and EFLTA. So welcome, and well, I believe that many of you, most of you have heard about our 2021 ACFL National World Language Teacher of the Year. As I mentioned, she's a Japanese teacher. She teaches all the levels in Eastern High School in Louisville, Kentucky, Jefferson County Public Schools. Plenty of accolades besides being ACFL Teacher of the Year. She was also the Japanese Teacher of the Year in Louisville, Kentucky, the KWLA Teacher of the Year, School Teacher of the Year. And if I mention all the things that Elena has created in Kentucky, we won't have a webinar. So let's start with the webinar. Elena, thank you very much on behalf of the EFLTA organization, the Indiana Language Roadmap, and all the world language teachers here in our state. Thank you for accepting our invitation. We all know that you are very busy, but it was great when you quickly answered the email to say, yes, I'm going to share my expertise with the Indiana teacher. Thank you, Elena. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your invitation. Thank you for having me. And, you know, everyone, I see a list of about 96 participants. Thank you all for coming out here today. And I hope to make it, you know, worth your while. So the title of my presentation is Supporting Your Students, Building Connections for Communication. And we only have an hour together today, but there is, if you want, an optional handout with some reflection questions for you all. And the URL is tinyurl.com/KWLA Elena. And I think we can have someone also put that in the chat. Yep, thank you so much. So those are reflection questions that give other teachers that you can do on your own, or when you have more time, or when you want to go back and work through it sort of at your own pace. So that's tinyurl.com/KWLA Elena. So the reason that I'm giving this presentation today is because something that I've always been concerned a lot about is my students' mental health. Even before, you know, 2019 and 2020 and now 2021 happened. A little bit background about myself. You know, I was a super nerdy kid in school, and I was very socially awkward. I didn't have good social skills, and I had a lot of anxiety. And for most of my childhood, I was the kid who was afraid to make eye contact when I was talking to other people. And I would like look at people's necks when I was talking to them. And something that helped me blossom socially and get a handle on some of my anxiety was in high school, I had the opportunity to take Spanish and then Japanese classes. And sort of being forced into social situations that were sort of like practice social situations, like scripted and, you know, in a classroom setting, helped me get a lot of confidence, and also helped me teach me like some coping skills for, you know, dealing with situations that otherwise caused me a lot of anxiety. And I was able to look in people's eyes finally. So today we're going to talk about how the world language classroom specifically can have a positive impact on student mental and emotional. Oh, and I want to shout out really quick, I do a whole bunch of clip art from this amazing Japanese website called irasatoya.com. So that's where all the clip art's coming from. So the first way that this can happen is helping students deal with uncertainty. Because, you know, in the world language classroom, there's a lot of uncertainty. But let's be honest, most students, I should really say most people, like clear answers. We like to know when there's a right and a wrong because we like to be right. Everyone hates that feeling that you've said something stupid or that you're wrong about something. And as teachers, we've probably observed in our own classrooms that, you know, high achieving students, the moment that they encounter something that they really need to struggle with, sometimes they shut down because they haven't learned how to deal with that struggle yet. Whereas students who are struggling on the opposite end of the academic spectrum, if they're struggling with something, sometimes they will act out rather than face a situation where they fail at an academic task, because acting out allows them to exert control over the situation. So before we talk about our students, let's put ourselves in their shoes for a moment. So I want you guys to think of yourselves as think about the last time that you couldn't figure out how to do a new task, especially something technology related. How did that feel? Think about the last time you couldn't understand something you were reading or hearing, especially if it's in your native language. You know, not even like in your second language, or something in your native language is like, I don't get that. Think about the last time you were put on the spot by someone. Think about the last time that you know what you need to do, but you don't know where to go or who to ask for the information that you need. And what an awful feeling that is. Like, you start the email, it's like, are you the right person to ask about this? I hope you are. And then think about the last time that you felt obligated to say, this is probably a stupid question, but, and then you ask the question anyway, because you feel this urge to phrase it that way. It's like, oh, this is probably a question, but. So what coping skills helped you in those uncertain situations? Now let's think about the situations we put kids in the language classroom. We ask students to take risks, not just academic risks, but social risks. We ask them to perform in front of their peers. We give students authentic text in which they don't know every word or phrase being used. We ask them to communicate with tools much less than what they're used to in their native language. And we set them up for that productive struggle. We put them in situations that we know is going to be difficult for them, and we ask them to struggle through it. So how can we teach coping skills to our students to help them deal with those types of situations? Well, here are some ideas. So something that I found I have to do in my classroom every year is I have to explicitly instruct students to ask for help. And I teach high school, so, you know, even by the time they're in high school, even my seniors sometimes, we still have to go through this routine every year of, yes, you can ask for help. Make it a part of your routine. Whatever types of activities you do in your classroom, make sure the students know that they can always expect a question time or how do you say time. Don't be afraid to repeat things. This is something that, you know, as a teacher, it took me a long time to train myself to do, but students are really, really struggling to hear you and understand you, and you might have to repeat yourself 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 times, but just keep repeating. And if they ask you, can you say that again? Can you repeat that again? Just do it. Just keep repeating. Repeat as many times as they need. You know, praise the students who ask questions or ask for a repeat. It's like, okay, good job. Have patience, because you don't know what's going on in students' heads, or when you're teaching in an online environment, you don't know what's going on in the environment around them. And, you know, sometimes it's very easy to get stuck in this mindset where it's like, I'm teaching you, why aren't you paying attention? You know, I'm putting in all this effort, I'm repeating so many times, why aren't you paying attention? The thing is, you don't know why they're not paying attention. You just don't know. So here's a little story from online teaching this year. In Japanese 1, I had this student who every single time he was like, the kid who asked me for a repeat after we had said the thing so many times, Like we would be doing a little like, call response, and he was in a large class with lots of kids who were online. And it was one of those things where, you say, student 1, student 2, student 3, they say the thing, 20, 25, you get to like the 29th student and it was this kid. And he was like, what are we doing? After you said it like, 28 times. And it's one day I did lose patience with him and I'm like, come on, can you please pay attention? He's like, oh, Sensei, I'm so sorry, but my little brother is right here and he has class the same time that you do. And I'm trying to help him with his class. And that was true. And so, that just goes to show you don't know what's going on. Even when they're in the classroom with you, you don't know what's going on in their heads. You don't know what happened in the hallway before your class. You don't know what happened at home. You don't know what happened in the cafeteria. You don't know what's going on in their heads. Just repeat. If they ask you for a repeat, just repeat. Keep going. Encourage them and, zen about the fact that you will have to say konnichiwa 5,000 times before some of them remember how to say it. And that's okay. That's what we signed up for. So a hardcore rule in my classroom is I never accept I don't know as an answer. Never accept I don't know, and make it clear from the first day you will not accept I don't know. But also make it clear to students that they have options. They can ask you for a repeat. Or if it's something like you're using a vocabulary list, you can point out to them, here it is on Google Classroom, here it is, in your binder, look right here, here's where the answer is, and then you come back to them. Or if it's something that they need to look up using an online tool, you show them how to use the online tool, and then you come back to them. But you always come back to them. No matter what, you always come back to them. And you ask them again, and you give them that chance to give the answer. I think it's also part of that is it's important to randomize however you call on students. And I know that plenty of you probably have methods of randomization that you already use. Like this year, I learned how to use that really fun, like the online wheel, the wheel of fate. What I used up until this year was very, very old-fashioned piece of technology. These are waribashi, or the type of disposable chopsticks that you can get at restaurants. And there's an Asian grocery store in Louisville where I can buy a pack of 500 of these. But if you don't have that in your community, you can always order them from Amazon or whatever, and just, write the student's name on the chopsticks. And I call this the Unmei no Te, the hand of fate. And I always make a big deal of using the hand of fate. And I always show the students when I'm in front of them, like I'm looking away from it when I pull out names. Because if I'm looking at it, they're like, you cheated, you looked. So they know it's truly random. It is truly like fate has chosen them, and they cannot change their fate, but they can rise to meet it. To quote Princess Mononoke. So that's Unmei no Te, the hand of fate. And something that, again, is something that it took me a long time to get the courage to do is to encourage us to listen to each other. Because remember, we learn language through imitation. And I know that there is somewhat of a fear here that, students are creating imperfect output and that they will hear imperfect output from each other. And I'll talk in a second about what to do when you start to see mistakes happening. But ultimately, something that I did observe in my classrooms is that sometimes the students who are struggling a little bit more, they will listen to what I call the goofballs, the students who put themselves out there, no matter what, no matter whether it's correct or incorrect. And they don't just copy what those students are saying, but they take encouragement from those students because they see, oh, so-and-so said something and then maybe got corrected. And that's fine. And no one cares. And no one called them stupid or anything. This is the type of environment where maybe if I say something and it's not perfect, it's fine. So that's the type of the environment that you want to try to create in your classroom. Let students know that it's okay to be goofy. Maybe it's okay to be wrong. Listen to each other, imitate each other. In Japanese class specifically, I'm very big on whenever the students have to do some sort of written communication, like respond to this text from your friend, blah, blah, blah. I make them read out loud whatever their written response is. And that also helps them, even though it's a written activity, now they can hear each other's responses. So it's extra reinforcement. And in the case of a character-based language, I believe it's extra important that they have that audio reinforcement in addition with the written communication, because some of my students really need to hear it, So ultimately, we want our students to have success meeting high expectations in a classroom where I don't know is never an acceptable answer. Know that it's okay to ask for help, feel comfortable taking academic risks and making mistakes, and practice by cues from the environment, i.e. listening to and observing what their peers do. These skills help students cope with uncertainty in all areas of life. Okay, so a reflection question for you guys to maybe do on your own or go through that worksheet that I showed you. What are you already doing to help your students develop coping skills? And how will you level up? So before I move on to the next section, I'm going to ask my moderators, are there any burning questions in the chat to address so far?
Right now, there aren't questions, but there are comments like if you use chopsticks, someone use other popsicle sticks or things like that.
Yep, the hand of fate. But you must make it truly random or they will say, you looked. Did fate always choose me? All right, so next I want to talk about how the language classroom can help our students develop their social emotional skills, because we all have ideas about the right and wrong ways to interact with other people. And we all have culturally based assumptions about what is respectful, what is disrespectful. And students, well, really everyone, needs to learn how to navigate those types of interpersonal differences if they're going to form healthy relationships. Because, you know, sometimes those differences exist not just among people from different cultures and different backgrounds, but even among people from maybe like the same demographic group or culture or whatever. So again, as adults, let's put ourselves into this mindset. Think about the last time that you felt like someone was angry at you, but you couldn't understand why. Think about the last time you said or did something that, in your opinion, someone else took totally the wrong way. Has that ever happened to you on the phone with a parent? It has happened to me on the phone with a parent. Felt like you were being evaluated by unfair or biased expectations? Or think about the last time you were in a situation with hidden social norms that you could not even begin to fathom or decode. I remember thinking back to the first time that I was at like a grown-up cocktail party, and all of a sudden I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to speak. I didn't know how to like be human. I was like, what is even happening in this room? And that can be a scary situation to be in. So what social emotional skills help you navigate those difficult situations? Let's think about what happens in the language classroom. We don't make students just learn about cultural differences in a textbook. We ask them to practice. We ask them to practice these different ways of speaking and interacting. We ask them to self-reflect about their own cultural assumptions. And we ask them to adapt to environments or cultural environments other than what they may be used to in their homes or in their communities. So how can language teachers teach social skills to our students? Well, here are some of my ideas. I hope you find them useful. I think it's really important to teach and practice cultural norms, and a big part of that is teaching conversation skills. And you may say like, oh, duh, what are you doing, Teacher of the Year? I know that. But it's not duh, because I remember when I first started teaching, the very first time I tried to teach AP Japanese, I remember we had like this little practice conversation with my students, and you know, the prompt that they were responding to was this Japanese friend who said, I won my tennis match. And my students were just like completely stymied. And they came to me and they were like, Sensei, I don't know what to say. She didn't ask me a question, so I don't know what to say. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like not only realizing, A, I had not taught this type of social interaction to my students, B, I had not taught them how to handle a conversation that wasn't the other person asking them questions. And C, the more I think about it in real life, you know, the conversations that you have are not just questions going back and forth, right? It's normally someone makes a statement and then you make a statement and then you make a statement. So you have to sort of be prepared for all these different little social situations. So something that I started doing in my classroom was getting some very, very scripted practices. Like I'll show you an example of that on the next slide. And at first, again, I was nervous because I'm like, oh, this is so scripted. It means my students aren't going to be able to handle it when they have to talk to an actual human being. But then I found out that that wasn't the case. Being able to practice in like an ultra scaffolded, ultra scripted format not only inevitably led them to some creativity, no matter how much I tried to restrict it, but it did well prepare them for those types of situations where they had to interact with an actual human being. So I use very, very targeted conversation practices. Like today, you all are going to ask each other out and turn each other down. My students love doing that, where they have to ask each other on dates and turn each other down politely in Japanese. So use lots of cues and prompts for them. And when it comes to writing, it's sometimes very important to model stylistic norms, especially when they're very, very different in the language that you're teaching, as opposed to maybe what the students might be used to. Again, this is something that I personally struggled with in Japanese, because formal writing in Japanese, like the type you have to do on the AP test, is almost everything that my English teachers always taught me not to do, like using lots of verbal hedges and stuff like that. So you have to sort of practice and get used to communicating in a different style than what you're used to. So here's an example of a conversation activity I use with my second-year students. And so the purpose of this is to practice reaction phrases like, that's tough, what a shame, I'm sorry to hear that, I'm sorry for your loss, or good luck. You know, not to give advice. Like in this conversation, we're not going to give advice. You just have to react appropriately. Just give an appropriate reaction. So first, the students have time to brainstorm their problems. It's like, what problem am I having today? I'm tired. My stomach hurts. I'm sad. I'm stressed. And then they have to think of a reason why. And then they have this little script to follow. So A says, what's wrong? B says what problem they have. A says, why, restating the problem, like, why do you have this problem? So now we have a little restating going on. And then B gives their reason, like, oh, I ate ice cream for breakfast, or my cat died, or I have a math test. And then A has to give an appropriate reaction, like one of the phrases that we're practicing today. So there is still a think on your feet aspect to this, because they have to understand what their partner is saying. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And there's still a little bit of creativity involved, because some of them will go out of their way to, you know, come up with very weird problems. You know how students are. They'll come up with weird problems. But ultimately, they're still getting the sort of like social practice that they need, so that they know what to say when these types of cues come up, either in real life or cough, cough on the AP test. My cat died. You need to know what to say. I also think it's important to teach, for example, to embrace differences. One part of that is knowing your students, which is easy to do in the foreign language classroom, because you ask them to talk about themselves, right? But I'm very sorry about this. Hold on. Just got a little tickle in my throat. Okay. When the students are talking about themselves, it's important for you as the teacher to know the right words in the target language to give them to work with. And that's something that can be tricky. And I will say, as like a non-native speaker, that's something I have to try very hard to stay on top of, because things like, for example, even something as basic as like, the family unit, when the students are introducing their family members, they need to be able to talk about different occupations. Like, how do I say stay-at-home dad? How do I say this, this, and this? How do I say this, this, and that? Some of them want to talk about their racial background. Some of them want to talk about their sexual orientation. And you need to know the appropriate words in the target language for that. I also think it's important to show the students that the language that you're teaching is living and the culture is living, and that it is not a monolith. Even in something like Japanese, it is not a monolith. So for example, in Japanese, there are different ways to say the pronoun I. And some of those pronouns can be gendered or can like project things about the speaker's image of themselves, their class, their gender identity, stuff like that. And that's something that's changing a lot. So I like to show students a couple of different little videos. It's like, here's some different perspectives on pronoun uses in Japanese, so they can see that not every Japanese speaker has the exact same opinion about pronoun usage. Like there's diversity within the target culture. There's different opinions about what are the appropriate words to use and how we talk about these issues. And then I think it's important to guide students through the reflective process, ACTful. We're big on having that cultural comparison, cultural reflection, and it's really important. So one thing, for example, is when you're asking students to do a sort of cultural comparison, make sure that you guide them towards seeing that there are always similarities and differences, not just differences, because sometimes it's easy to fall into this mindset like the culture that you're teaching is alien or exotic, and you don't want to do that. So make sure that you show them that, hey, there's things here that are real similar to what we do, but also, there's things that are really different. And with the reflection process, I like to give them little warm-ups. Sometimes we watch like a video or read an authentic test or something. It's like, what do you observe? Like if it's a video of someone going to a Japanese high school, what's in the classroom? What do you notice about what the students are wearing? Real basic observation questions. Ask them for a comparison. What is the same as Eastern High School? Ask them for a contrast. What is different from Eastern High School? And then a question that I've gotten a lot of mileage out of is asking them, what about this appeals to you? And you always get really interesting answers from that question. So ultimately, we want our students to understand that their cultural norms, their ways of acting are not universal. They to have experience adapting to different norms and expectations, to practice social skills that they need, sometimes to resolve differences, like having a disagreement or offering criticism. Understand the value of customs that are different. And that's where that question, like, what about this appeals to you, can be very useful in demonstrating, hey, this thing you learned that's really different, what about it is valuable or good? And to be aware that as important as it is to understand different cultures, they should not make assumptions about how people in the target culture are always going to think or always going to act. And that's where showing that diversity of perspectives can be really important. So then the question is, what are you already doing to help your students develop social skills in your classroom? And how will you level up? So before I move on to the next section, once again, do we have any burning questions in the chat?
Yes. Some teacher asked what is verbal hack, but Teresa has already explained. Another teacher asked, could you talk more about your imitation games? Can you give some examples? How do you do games with imitations?
Oh, imitation games. Okay. So I'll be honest, I do these mostly with Japanese 1 and Japanese 2. And it tends to be either what we call a toss game or a snake game. So a toss game is where it's a very simple question, answer. And the question is always going to be the same, like, how are you? And then the answer is something that can be different. So person 1 says the question, person 2 answers the question, and then person 2 asks the next person the same question, and then they give their response. So there's one question that's getting repeated, so everyone hears and repeats the same question, a limited set of responses that gets, repeated. So even if someone isn't sure what to say, maybe by the time that it's their turn to answer, they will have heard several other students answer. So at least they'll have some, like, they can imitate, say something. I should probably explain the format's toss game. In a moment, I'm going to explain that my classrooms have a stuffed mascot, and the stuffed animal mascot is what we use when we do a toss game, where the students stand up and they literally, like, they throw the animal. So it's like they ask a question, throw the mascot, the person who catches it has to answer, and then they throw the mascot again, and it goes like that. In a situation where we can't stand up or can't move around, or something like I did with my online classes, is we do the snake game, where it's like we're just going to snake around the room, or if you're online, we're going to snake around the roster. Just going to snake around the roster, and it's just question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
There's
All
no
right.
further questions.
All right, so I'm going to move on to our third section, teaching resiliency. So this is a hot topic in education right now. Look at me being relevant. Resiliency. We might have observed as teachers that sometimes students don't want to waste their time struggling with something that they don't understand right away. And let's be honest, our students know how to apply their skills to shortcut to success.
Elena,
Yes.
we think there is something with the audio.
Is it sounding weird?
Yeah.
Okay, I know how to fix this. I just need to leave and rejoin. Is it okay if I do that real fast?
That's fine, Elena. We'll let you back in.
All right, I will.
Right. So in the meantime, yeah, Elena, that's fine. In the meantime, I would like to invite you to our next webinar while Elena is fixing this technical problem. Next Thursday at 4 p.m. Actually, I can see the presenters for next webinars. Professor Kashika Singh. She's going to present about assessment. Next week, 2 back-to-back webinars with also national renowned speaker Leslie Graham. She is going to be with us on Monday and on Thursday. And finally, also, she is here, Professor Nikos. We will have her on July 25th. So please just register for one or all the webinars that we have in the same link that you use for Elena. So we are ready for our teacher of the year. So maybe
Okay, is this better?
Okay, yeah, better. Thank you.
I apologize for that.
No.
It has happened before, and for some reason, me leaving and rejoining just fixes it. So,
right.
Problem solving. Anyway, students know how to shortcut to success, but at the cost of developing real proficiency. And a lot of our students, sometimes if they can't shortcut through an obstacle, they will just give up. Or this student, if you look really carefully at the clip art, he is cheating on this test, using a shortcut to success. So, all right, let's put ourselves in our students' shoes for a moment. Let's think about ourselves as adults. Think about the last time that you genuinely struggled with something you really wanted to succeed at. What motivated you to keep going? Opposite of that, think about the last time that you couldn't get something to work, especially something technology related, and you just quit. You said, I don't have time for this. I tried. I don't have time to keep messing with this. Adios. Think about the last time that you handed off a task to someone that you knew could do it better. Because in the adult world, that is sometimes an option. Think about the last time that you were forced to do a professional development that you felt was a waste of your time. So you Googled all the answers to the exit quiz and then you washed your hands of it. I'm not saying I did that last fall, but I might have done that last fall. One of those state mandated trainings. So when you kept persisting, what motivated you to keep persisting? And when you quit, what factors caused you to give up and walk away? So let's think about what happens in the language classroom. We build on previous knowledge in the same way that core content classes like math and literacy does. In fact, we're teaching literacy, right? Which means that early failures will snowball into long-term struggles for our students. And then we deliberately put students in very challenging situations, again, that productive struggle. And we ask them not to use the shortcut skills that they know how to use outside the classroom in like real world scenarios. And for good reason, because we know that if they rely on the shortcut skills, they won't be developing proficiency. So how can we teach students resiliency in a learning environment? How do we create a classroom environment that encourages and reinforces resiliency in the face of struggle? I think some of you knew this was coming. You got to model how to use the tools of the language appropriately. And you have to model to your students what the limitations of those tools are I know Google Translate is the elephant in the room, so we can all, I'm talking about Google Translate. Something that might be helpful right away is to demonstrate to students how it super does not work in your target language. For some of us, it super does not work in the target language. But you can model what are appropriate tools to use and when. So for example, when we're going to do an assignment, like, hey, we're going to talk about our families, you can, for example, show the students how to, in Japanese class, we would maybe use an online tool like jisho.org, which is like dictionary. And I would demonstrate to students, okay, we're gonna, like, say you wanna say the occupation of a parent or family member. Well, here's how you do it. You wanna make sure you're searching for a noun. You wanna make sure you look for the common word and blah, 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 blah. So I demonstrate appropriate ways to use the language tool if the vocabulary that I've given them or that the students have generated is not enough. And sometimes it's not. But, related to that, the third point here is to give them enough scaffolding, as much as possible, so that ideally they're set up to produce whatever language you want them to produce without having to over rely on these language tools. And a big part of that is getting the students to buy into the vocabulary generation process. That's my next slide. So another tool that I repeatedly show my students how to use is my best friend, Japanese Wikipedia. And this came up last year when my 3rd and 4th year Japanese students were participating in the Global Classmates program, which is they're paired with a Japanese classroom and they do sort of like a message exchange on the Schoology platform. And in one of the exchanges, the students had to recommend movies to each other, specifically, like my students had to recommend movies, like American movies that they thought would be good for Japanese high school students who want to learn English. And then the opposite of that, the Japanese high school students had to recommend movies that they thought would be good for the American students who want to learn Japanese, okay? And I gave the students the recommendations and I showed them, it's like, if you don't know how to say your movie title in Japanese, don't assume you got to look it up on Japanese Wikipedia, because American movie titles in Japanese can get crazy. Like sometimes it's a straight translation, sometimes it's like a transliteration, sometimes it's a totally different title. Like lots of Disney movies have just totally different titles in Japanese, unrelated to whatever the English title is. So I had the students like ask me, like, what about this? What about this? And I was demonstrating to them how to use Japanese Wikipedia to look up these movie titles. And then one of my students said, what about Barbie and Fairytopia? And at first I was like, is that really the movie you want to recommend? And she was adamant that was the movie she wanted to recommend. So I was like, okay. And I remember thinking, there is no way the Japanese Wikipedia is going to have a page about Barbie and Fairytopia. There is no way. And it delivered. And it delivered. So, these are the type of things where you got to demonstrate to your students, like if we were demonstrating a list of movies, I would never think to put Barbie and Fairytopia on that list of movie names. But if it comes up, you got to show the students where to look for it and how to use those tools appropriately. So going back to my point about student buy-in, something that sort of helps is having the students do the work for you. When we say like, here's what we're going to talk about, here's some vocabulary, you give them a vocabulary list to start, and I am infamous for giving them vocabulary lists. They're way too long, they're way too complex anyway, but they will always come up with more things that they want to say. So that's where, when the activity has a built-in how do you say time, I always have like a Google Doc. And Google Doc is great because you can share it with multiple sections. Like if you have multiple sections of Japanese 1 or multiple sections of Japanese 2, they can all share the same Google Doc. And whatever the students are like, how do you say this? How do you say this? You can just put it on the Google Doc. And now they have that back to refer back to. I also think it's important to use authentic text as models. And that's something I did a lot this year. Whenever we wanted to talk about COVID-19 or the pandemic, I would go onto like the NHK Easy News website, which is like easy Japanese news articles, and have the students read that so that we know that we're using the right words and the right terms in context to talk about this thing, instead of trying to look it up on a dictionary, because then you wouldn't get the right words, or you wouldn't get whatever specific vocabulary Japanese people are actually using to talk about shutdown or cancellation or vaccine or COVID. And then it helps, especially if you have like Google Docs and Google Classroom or whatever other platform your district might use, to have that building reference archive for your students, so that when topics come up again, as they inevitably do, they're like, hey, if you want vocabulary about movies, you can go back to blah, 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 when we did that, and you'll have that right there for you. I also think it's important to know when to focus on accuracy and when to focus on communication. And, general rule of thumb is that in interpersonal communication, it's important to let the student just communicate and try to get their point across and not stop them to correct every single mistake. Versus with presentational writing and speaking, ideally, the students will be able to do a draft that you can give them feedback on, so that they have time to go through, and if they have mistakes, they can correct their mistakes before they present their thing. There are times, if you're playing a game, if you're just having conversation practice, where you will hear a mistake being made or maybe getting repeated many times. And in that case, after the activity, I like to sometimes do what I call like a whole class correction, where it's like, hey, I heard this, but it should be this instead. And then we all practice the correct thing, and I don't call out anyone specifically. But when you do have a student that's struggling, like just cannot get the words out. And I know that sometimes we've all had that student that's like, they're trying so hard, but sometimes what comes out is gibberish. Pull them aside, not in front of their peers. It's really important to not do this in front of their peers if you can avoid it, and just try to get them to repeat the correct thing as many times as it takes, and do not settle for close enough. Do not settle for close enough, because they will know the moment that you give up on them. They can sense it. So push them until they can say what they want to say, until they can get it right. And by right, I mean saying what they want to say, so that they have that experience of struggling and then having success. So ultimately, we want our students to know how to use language tools to help them succeed rather than as shortcuts to success, have control over and investment in the learning process, doing the work for you, making those vocab lists, and experiencing success after being corrected and trying again. So these skills help students build resiliency to persist in learning. What are you already doing to help your students build resiliency? And how will you level up? Before I move into my final section, do we have any more burning questions in the chat?
There are comments rather than questions, and I think there's no question at all. So we can leave the rest of the question at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So in my final section, I'm going to talk about connections. And what does it mean when a student feels connected to their school or to their peers? I'm going to go with the Center for Disease Control and Prevention definition, is that a student feels connected when they feel or perceive that there are peers and adults at their school that care about them as individuals. And when they have that, that improves academic achievement, improves mental health, and lowers the risk of unhealthy behaviors, for example, drug and alcohol abuse or cutting. Connectedness lowers affective barriers, and it makes them more willing to take risks in the classroom. And students, if they want to succeed at learning a language, also have to learn how to make connections across physical and cultural barriers. That's also a part of it. And that's something that uniquely we can do for them in the language classroom. So connections. Think about the last time that you felt like you didn't belong to a group of people. Think about the last time that you really, really just wanted someone who had something in common with you to understand your experience. And sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, think about the last time you shared an in-joke with someone, something that like would have been impossible for somebody else to understand, but you both know exactly why it's so funny. So what makes you feel connected to others? And what makes you feel disconnected from others? So in the language classroom, students are forced to interact with their peers who may not share their background, culture, or perspective. Students are asked to engage with a language that may feel impossibly distant, physically and culturally. And students are asked to practice the language, or begged to practice the language outside the classroom, but many of them might lack the resources to do so. So how can language teachers help our students make meaningful human connections? Well, you can start on the classroom level, build connections among your classmates. I like being silly in front of my class, and it's something that brings them together because they all have that shared experience of seeing me being a doofus and, you know, talking to the peers about why Ms. K is like such a doofus. Now, if that's not you and that's not your style, then don't try to be something that you're not, just be yourself. But whoever you are in front of your students, be that person. And that you are a shared experience that all of your students can refer back to. Do something in your classroom that is unique. Come up with your own routines, your own yearly traditions, and create shared memories. Things that your students, if they go through level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, things that they can look forward to, like when we do the New Year postcards every year, when we do Onigiri Day, when we do all these things. Another thing that's important is to give your students roles in the classroom to make them feel like they are contributing, they belong, they have a job. In Japanese class, we have the daily class president who starts the class every day. We have someone who's designated to hand out papers. We have someone who's designated to like erase the board. God, what an old-fashioned piece of technology that is, a whiteboard. Here's an example about the power of having something unique in your classroom. So I think I already gave away, I have a stuffed animal mascot in my classrooms. It changes every year. And every year I take the stuffed animal mascot to visit my mom over fall break, and I do a little photo diary of the stuffed animal mascot having a little adventure, and that becomes like a model for something I want the students to do as a project later. So one year I took Coco, this is Coco, she's a sea otter, Coco the Rocco. I took her to my mom's house, and while I was dangling Coco in front of myself and trying to take a picture of her, my mom's dog attacked her because I guess he thought that I was trying to play with her. And somehow, because I had my camera phone out, I managed to capture this all. And I did like a whole story about how Coco got attacked by the monster and she was hurt. And then, you know, my mom came and fixed Coco, and then she reconciled with the dog. And it was so beautiful and perfect. And I was like, this is the best thing I've ever done. I showed it to my kids when I came back from break. They loved it. They thought it was hilarious. It was great. It was really engaging. So the next year, I had a different mascot because I had a different mascot every year. And I decided not to do the photo diary over fall break because I thought, well, I already have this perfect one about Coco. And, you know, I'll just show it when I get back from fall break and the kids will think it's hilarious and they'll love it. Guess what? The second year I tried to show it, went over like a lead balloon because I had new students and Coco was not their mascot. They had a different mascot. They didn't know who Coco was. It was like, I don't know her. They weren't engaged in this. They didn't think it was interesting. It didn't appeal to them because it wasn't their thing. And that's how powerful having just something like a stuffed animal can be in terms of like sharing, creating a shared sense of identity and community among your students. Just a stupid little stuffed animal is so powerful. So I think it's also important to show students that you care. I know I'm watching my time right now. You know, solicit feedback. What did you enjoy? What was difficult for you? What do you wish we had done more of? Create student-centered practice as much as possible. They love to talk about themselves. Let them talk about themselves. It's the language classroom. And when you enforce your classroom rules, always ask before you assume. So one ironclad rule in my physical classroom is I don't let students put their heads down. That's the hill I die on. You know, you do not put your head down in my classroom. But when a student does put their head down, I always, instead of coming at them with, lift your head up, what are you doing? Lift your head up. I always ask, are you okay? Are you tired? Do you need to get a drink of water? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need to go to the nurse? You know, I ask them, and that has de-escalated so many situations and saved me so much time and grief. Now, it's not a magic bullet. It doesn't always work. You know, sometimes things do escalate, but it has solved a lot of problems for me before they start. So ask before you assume why a student is doing something, and sometimes you can sort of nip problems in the bud. And it shows students that you care about them and you're not enforcing your rules just to be mean, you're enforcing your rules because you care about them. And then super important, connect students to target language speakers near and far. You know, I have a list of social media bookmarks that I share with my students and I let them add to it. In fact, I give them assignments where they have to like suggest things and I add it to the master list if I think it's good. Participate in an educational exchange if you're able to, especially ones that are for educators, that are run by people who understand some of the privacy issues that sometimes get involved in that. So like for Japanese, I love the Global Classmates program. It's super awesome. It's specifically for educators and has a lot of those built-in, you know, like privacy protections that you're missing from some of the other commercial stuff. Let students explore. I have an assignment called a practice diary. I'm just like, go to a Japanese website, you know, here's the bookmark list. You are free to explore this, but you can do other things if you want. Just let them explore and use their language and see what interests them. And keep in mind that, for example, if students decide to say interact with a Japanese speaker on Twitter or online, some of those beginning interactions can be what we call parasocial. Like I encourage my students to go find famous people on Twitter and, you know, maybe respond to one of their tweets with like, great, or that's awesome, or I love your music in Japanese. And that's a parasocial interaction because they're not automatically best friends with this famous person. You know, it doesn't work like that. But for a lot of them, that's more comfortable than having a very intimate connection right away off the bat. It's something that's a little bit safer for them. It lets them sort of dip their toes into interacting in the target language. You know, telling a celebrity, I love your music. That's great. That's like a safe thing to do. So ultimately, we want our students to feel connected to their classmates, feel connected to their teacher, have experience connecting to speakers of the target language, have experience finding and initiating new connections with others across physical and cultural barriers. Students who feel connected are happier, healthier, and more invested in their learning. So what are you already doing to help your students feel connected? And how will you level up? Before I move into my concluding remarks, I know we're short for time. Are there any specific questions from this section?
There is one. Natalia asked, do you ask for volunteers to do the classroom tests, or do you just assign them? If it's a second choice, have you had the experience of someone not willing to do it?
Yeah, I will say for that, I change it up depending on the situation. For Japanese 1, I let people volunteer, and I have some students who are never ever going to do it in Japanese 1, and I'm like, that's okay, it's not their thing. With Japanese 2, 3, and 4, my classes tend to be much smaller, and for that, I actually have them take turns. So it really depends. And then this year, you know, this year was weird. This year, I just let people volunteer, and almost all the time I would have at least one person willing to do it. So.
I see. There's another question asking, can you make several examples of parasocial? What is called parasocial?
Okay, parasocial is like what I was talking about earlier, where it's a social interaction, but not a real connection. So for example, when I tell my Japanese students, like, here's Utada Hikaru's Twitter account. You know, Utada Hikaru is a super, super mega international star. And she's gonna tweet, you know, here's my new album. And I want you to respond to that tweet with, I love your work. I love your album. I love this song. You know, that's an example of a parasocial interaction, because when you tell a famous person, hey, I love your thing, you're not best friends, right? Like that's not a real connection that you're forming with them, but it is still an interaction. So that's what we call like parasocial. Like when you tell someone who's kind of famous or a celebrity, hey, I love your stuff. Hey, I listen to your stuff. Hey, I read your stuff. Hey, I watch your stuff. I think it's awesome. That's parasocial. Hey, any more questions from this section?
No.
Okay, so to sort of bring some concluding remarks. You know, student mental health is more important now than ever. You know, when I picked my topic back in fall 2019, I want to talk about student mental health. I didn't know it was coming down the pipeline. I had no idea in November 2019 what was going to happen. But you know, our students have always had mental health struggles that have largely flown under the radar, or that maybe some of us weren't super aware of. I'm including myself in that category. You know, even as someone who had major anxiety in high school, I sometimes also fall into the mindset where I don't think about or consider how my own students might have those same pressures. So at the end of the day, with human connection, resiliency, and healthy relationships, we, all of us, teachers and students, can get through this. And I want to shout out to my clip art source again, irasatoya.com. It is a Japanese website, but it is possible to navigate it. If you don't know Japanese, that's where some of those browser extensions might come in, you know, those language tools. There's text-based links on the bottom of like the main landing page, so you can use a translator to translate the text-based links, and you can go like food, school, holidays, stuff like that. Okay, and if anyone wants to contact me, I have the world's longest email address, and it's there for you, elena.kamenetzky@jefferson.kyschools.us. And I'm also on Twitter. I'm trying to get better at using Twitter, but I'm also on Twitter. And that's all I had. Do we have any other comments or questions?